Hi everyone, my name is Monica Taylor. Now I'm here today to share with you a couple of stamp sets. Now Scrapbook.com has come out with some really fun stamp sets for the Christmas season. And a couple of the stamps that I decided to work with are the Sassy Christmas stamps and then also the Big and Bold Christmas. Now what I decided to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of cards using the 6x6 collection kit, which I picked up a few weeks ago. And it is on sale as part of the Christmas collection, and it is from Prima Marketing. It has some really great traditional papers, and I think they're going to make some great Christmas cards. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create 3 cards using the Big and Bold Christmas set, and then I'm going to go ahead and create a few more cards using the Sassy Christmas. But the Sassy Christmas set I'm going to go ahead and post over on my YouTube channel, so we'll make sure that we have a link to that as well, so you'll be able to see both sets in action. So the first thing I did is I flipped through the 6x6 paper collection and I picked out 3 designs. And this cardstock is really nice cardstock. It has designs on the front and back both, so you have a lot of selection as far as your design. Now like I said, the stamp set I'm going to use is the Big and the Bold Christmas sentiments. So you're going to want to probably make sure that you measure out your cardstock before you start stamping, just to make sure that you do have enough cardstock to work with. I know a lot of us like to mat some of our cardstock, so you just want to make sure that your piece that you're going to be stamping on will hold your sentiments, because it is very big and very bold. So the paper that I started out with was cut down to 4 inches by 5 1/4, and I ended up stamping on this cardstock. And then I trimmed it down just a bit because I wanted to go ahead and mat it onto some black cardstock. So you'll be able to see that as we get further into the video. So once I picked out all of my cardstock and I kind of figured out exactly what I was going to do, I went ahead and pulled out my stamps. Now these stamps definitely live up to their name, Big and Bold. They are really beautifully stamped, but you want to make sure that you get nice crisp impressions. So I went ahead and pulled out my Misti to make sure that I can get my ink stamped perfectly onto my cardstock. Now the ink that I'm going to be using is from Scrapbook.com, and I'm using the black hybrid ink. And I find when I have a new stamp set, the Scrapbook.com ink works great, because a lot of times if you have a new stamp set, it might stick a little bit to your paper, and when you have stamps that are that take a lot of ink, you can easily get a stamped image that is not perfectly aligned, especially if you're having to stamp it a couple of times. So I find using the Scrapbook.com hybrid ink is perfect because it doesn't stick to my paper. And then of course, by having the Misti, you can easily ensure that your paper or your cardstock is going to stay in place, so you can stamp it multiple times. What I also love about the Misti is it has a grid, so you can easily line up your stamp set to make sure that it's perfectly aligned before you even start stamping. So with my stamp in place, I grabbed my black hybrid ink and I generously added some ink to my image. And then I have to admit, it did take me a couple of times to get a nice crisp image, but that's what's great about the Misti, is you know that your paper is going to stay right in place and you can stamp it several times. Now this sentiment, Believe in the Magic of Christmas, went perfect with this designer paper, but I decided I still wanted to add just a little bit more design towards the top of the card, and that's when I brought out some really thin washi tape that I had in my stash. And then after I had added my washi tape, I went ahead and I trimmed down my cardstock 1/4 inch on both the top and the side, because like I said, I like to mat my cards onto black cardstock, especially if I have a lighter type of a cardstock, because I really think it makes it pop. And then once I added my adhesive and I adhered it to my black cardstock, I was ready to move on to my next card. Okay, so the next stamp that I wanted to use is the stamp that reads Joy to the World. And as we all know, Joy to the World is a beautiful Christmas song that is sung during the holiday season. So in keeping with that musical theme, I decided to use one of the little images of carolers singing from that paper stack. And the image is really cute, but it was really light, so I decided I wanted it to pop just a little bit more. So I am going to go ahead and adhere that to some black cardstock. But I first wanted to kind of figure out what my design was going to be. And I decided to put the sentiment, the Joy to the World, towards the bottom of the cardstock. And then I'm going to put the little image of the carolers towards the top. So again, I just went ahead and I lined up my cardstock in my Misti, and I used those grids on the Misti to line up my sentiment, and then I generously added some of that black hybrid ink from Scrapbook.com to get a nice crisp image on my card. Now, I know a lot of times sentiments aren't necessarily your focal point, but with this stamp set, your sentiment definitely is your focal point, and it makes it easy to create really nice, simple Christmas cards that don't take a lot of time. You could easily put together an assembly line and create several Christmas cards in one sitting. All you would need to do is cut out your cardstock ahead of time and just use your Misti tool or any stamp platform that you might have to just stamp several of your cardstocks. Now, one thing you're going to find when you are using some of these stamps that do require a lot of ink, if you do decide that you want to make several cards, it is a nice idea to do an assembly line, because that ink really is nice and it absorbs them to your stamp, and it will make your stamping go a lot faster. I know many of us clean off our stamps before we actually store them away, but if you're actually, like I said, making an assembly line, you can just keep adding ink to your stamp and just keep stamping till you get as many cards as you need. And as you can see, after several impressions with the ink, I was able to get a really nice, vibrant joy, and To the World comes out really crisp as well. All right, so once I had my sentiment exactly the way I wanted it, I wanted to go ahead and mat that little caroler set that I had talked about. So I'm just taking some of my black cardstock, and I'm going to go ahead and adhere these carolers to the black cardstock. And then I'm going to use my Tonic Studio guillotine trimmer to trim down the edges. And while I had my trimmer out, I went ahead and took another piece of that black cardstock, and I trimmed down the backing that I'm going to use for my base. And then the size of the black cardstock is going to be the 4 inches by 5 1/4. Now, you might be wondering why I didn't go ahead and trim down my cardstock before I actually stamped on it. But again, like I said, these sentiments are really big, and I wanted to make sure that I had enough room to be able to put my magnets and hold down my cardstock, and that my Joy to the World would fit nicely on it. And then once I was happy with the impression, then I went ahead and I trimmed just a little bit off of the sides, so that way the matting of the black cardstock would show through. And as you can see, the little carolers that are matted go really nicely with the black cardstock, and it really makes for a nice finish. So once I used a little bit of foam tape to pop up those little carolers, I was done with my second base, and it was time to work on my third card. All right, so for the third card, I decided to go ahead and take a piece of that cardstock that I'm working off of, and I decided to stamp the sentiment directly on just a band, and I'm going to go ahead and put that over some of the cardstock that's a little bit more busy. Now, I could have easily stamped directly onto the cardstock, but I wanted to make sure that my image showed up nicely, and that's why I decided to go ahead and take some paper that wasn't quite so busy to stamp my sentiment. And then I could easily trim down the band and put it directly over my cardstock. So again, I'm just using my Misti to ink up my sentiment, and I'm going to get a nice crisp impression. And as you can see, after several swipes, I'm able to get a nice crisp impression that reads Merry Christmas. So you can see on all 3 cards, my main tools that I'm using are my Misti, I'm using my Scrapbook.com blank ink, and then I'm using my guillotine trimmer. And I'm easily able to create 3 really cute cards that are similar but still have their differences. And then after I had my sentiment nicely trimmed, I went ahead and determined exactly the placement on my card. Now, like I said, the cardstock that I chose for my last card was a little bit more busy than the other 2 cards that I used, and you can easily place your sentiment anywhere on the cardstock, but I decided to go towards the middle, and I'm using the lines on the design of the cardstock to help measure up where exactly I'm going to put my Merry Christmas. And then I'm going to take some of my adhesive and add it directly to the cardstock. And then as a little extra design, I'm going to go ahead and add some washi tape to outline the Merry Christmas sentiment. And then once the washi tape was adhered, then it was time once again to go ahead and take out my black cardstock, which again the measurements are 4 inches by 5 1/4, and mount my designed cardstock onto that. And then from there, it's just as simple as getting your A2 cards and adding the designs that you've created onto your white cardstock. And now you easily have 3 really cute Christmas cards that were able to be created in no time at all. And then once you have your cardstock mounted onto your white base, you could easily add one more embellishment, which I decided to do. I showed you some of those Nuvo drops in the beginning of the video, and of course I had to go ahead and give them a try. So I went ahead and I pulled out a couple other colors as well. So the Nuvo drops that I'm using on the Joy to the World, of course, is the new Nuvo stone drops. And while I'm only using the stone drops as a little embellishment, there's so much more you can do with these, and I hope to get some videos out there for you to show you some of the other things you can do using this brand new product from Nuvo. And then I brought out a couple of colors of my Nuvo Crystal Drops to add a few more embellishments. And the colors that I'm using here are the black, and then I'm going to be bringing out the lime in just a moment to add to the Merry Christmas card. Now, as always, I'll leave a list of all the products that I've used to create the cards along with the links to the stores. And if you've enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up. And like I said, I'll also have a link to my YouTube channel on the links below. So if you have a chance, go ahead and head over to my YouTube channel where you can see all the projects that I've created. All right, everybody, thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll see you again next time.